So congratulations on getting through one of the most difficult reading passages you'll ever have to encounter. We're going to continue practicing, and we'll do so by finishing the second passage of test number 2. Of course, we're going to be implementing all the little things that we've learned along the way, the strategies, and also the tips and the tricks. First, we'll read the excerpt. Second, we're going to annotate as we skim through this passage. Yes, we will be chunking, and this passage appears to have 90 lines. So 2/3 of that will be right around 66-ish, so we can stop at 66. And then when it comes to answering questions, we are going to be using the My Answer strategy. So without further ado, let's dive right in by reading this excerpt. This passage is adopted from Lane King, Can Economics Be Ethical? And it's one of those excerpts that really doesn't have much to offer. All we have is a title, and we know that this story or this passage is really going to be centered on ethics and economics. Let's read and annotate as we go. Recent debates about the economy have rediscovered the question, is that right? Where right means more than just profits or efficiency. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. Others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. But before we can label any market outcome as immoral or sneer at economists who try to put a price on being ethical, we need to be clear on what we are talking about. Let's pause here and annotate. So by reading the first few lines up to line 10, we can annotate this fact. It sounds like some people are arguing that free markets are already ethical because they allow for personal choice. So people say that the free markets are already ethical. Let's read on. From line 11, there are different views on where ethics should apply when someone makes an economic decision. Consider Adam Smith, widely regarded as the founder of modern economics. He was a moral philosopher who believed sympathy for others was the basis for ethics. We would call it empathy nowadays. So it sounds like this paragraph begins by telling us that there are different views. So it sounds like it's priming us to know that there's going to be different viewpoints presented. And it appears as though the first viewpoint presented is from this person named Adam Smith. So we can actually label this VP1 just to help us remember where the first viewpoint was brought up. And it sounds like this person was a moral philosopher, and he believed that sympathy for others was the basis for ethics. So, keep going from line 17. But one of his key insights in The Wealth of the Nations was that acting on this empathy could be counterproductive. He observed people becoming better off when they put their own empathy aside and interacted in a self-interested way. Interesting. So, this gentleman thought that sometimes you can put empathy aside and work in a self-interested way. Whenever planners use cost-benefit analysis to justify a new daily railway line, or someone retrains to boost his or her earning power, or a shopper buys one to get one free, they're using the same approach, empathizing with someone and seeking an outcome that makes that person as well off as possible, although the person they are empathizing with may be themselves in the future. I think an important thing to note here is that Smith was justifying selfish behavior by the outcome. A small dose of selfishness was healthy, according to this person. So I'm going to annotate selfishness equals healthy. And he's justifying selfishness by the outcome. So that's important to know. I'm just going to point it to here so we'll know where to go find it if we need to see it when we actually answer these questions. So let's read on from line 31. Instead of judging consequences, Aristotle said ethics was about having the right character, displaying virtues like courage and honesty. It is a view put into practice whenever business leaders are chosen for their good character. So here we are thrust into the second viewpoint. So let's label this viewpoint 2. And this is Aristotle, who says that ethics was about having the right character. So his main idea is that ethics is having the right character. It is a viewpoint put into practice whenever business leaders are chosen for their good character. So line 36. But it is a hard philosophy to teach. Just how much loyalty should you show to a manufacturer that keeps losing money? Show too little and you are a greed as good corporate raider. Too much and you're wasting money on unproductive capital. Aristotle thought there was a golden mean between the two extremes, and finding it was a matter of fine judgment. But if ethics is about character, it's not clear what those characteristics should be. So we find out that there's a golden mean, which is a center point between those two extremes. And one other thing that really stands out here is if ethics is about character, it is not clear what those characteristics should be. So we can write unclear ethical characteristics. So let's keep going. And now we are on the next paragraph, line 45. There is yet another approach. Okay, so before we even go too far, this is the third viewpoint that we're being introduced to right here. There is yet another approach. Instead of rooting ethics in character or the consequences of actions, we can focus on our actions themselves. So the third viewpoint is focusing on our actions themselves. So focus on actions. From this perspective, some things are right, some wrong. We should buy fair trade goods. We shouldn't tell lies in advertisements. Ethics becomes a list of commandments, a catalog of do's and don'ts. When a finance official refuses to devalue a currency because they have promised not to, they are defining ethics this way. According to this approach, devaluation can still be bad even if it would make everybody better off. So based on this viewpoint, it just becomes a list of commandments. I'm just going to annotate commandments here in case we need it when you're answering questions. We know where to go find it. So let's read on. Again, we're going to be stopping at line 66. So the next paragraph. Many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions pull in different directions, but clashes are not inevitable. So we know just by reading that first sentence is that there's going to be a conflict when these three forces are pulling in different directions. And we know that that's definitely going to happen because it says clashes are not inevitable. Keep going. Take fair trade coffee that is sold with a certification that indicates that farmers and workers who produced it were paid a fair wage. So this parenthetical here is just explaining what fair trade coffee is. And that's just coffee that's sold with a certification, indicating that farmers and workers who produced it were paid a fair wage. So take fair trade coffee, for example, buying it might have good consequences. Be virtuous and also be the right way to act in a flawed market. Common ground like this suggests that even without agreement on where ethics applies, ethical economics is still possible. And we're going to pause here. Let's see if we can annotate anything further. It sounds like there's some common ground right here. So it sounds like there's some common ground to be found. And the example cited for commonality of common ground is, in fair trade coffee, where we try to maximize on profits. And at the same time, the people who are producing this coffee are paid a fair wage. So with that said, let's actually go ahead and try to answer these questions. Please note that once again, we've actually labeled these questions. Each one will have one of those 8 types of questions associated with it. So question 1, it's a main idea / big picture question. The main purpose of the passage is to do what? This is a passage question. We haven't read the whole passage, so we can't answer it yet. Let's go on to question 12. In the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. So once again, in the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections to criticizing the ethics of free markets. This, I don't feel as though is one of those questions that we can answer using the My Answer strategy. So let's just read the choices one by one and we'll try to make a decision as we go. Smith's association of free markets with ethical behavior still applies today. B says, free markets are the best way to generate high profits, so ethics are a secondary consideration. C says, free markets are ethical because they are made possible by devalued currency. I don't believe this was said anywhere, so let's look at D. Free markets are ethical because they enable individuals to make choices. That was kind of said, actually. Let's go back over A. Smith's association of free markets with ethical behavior still applies today. Free markets are the best way to generate high profits, so ethics are a secondary consideration. So B hasn't been said. So we are left with A and D. Once again, we have a 50% chance of getting this question right. And if you recall, we found that when you have 2 choices, to find the correct answer, we find the tiebreaker rather by rereading the passage and finding what's actually stated. So was Smith's association of free markets with ethical behavior still applies today mentioned in the passage? I don't believe that has been said yet, so it's got to be D. Free markets are ethical because they enable individuals to make choices. And I believe that was actually stated right in the beginning in here. And he goes to say, some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. All right, and then let's go to question 15. The main purpose of the 5th paragraph, lines 45 through 46, is to do what? This, again, is a function question, which tries to figure out why the author or narrator used a certain style or placed a certain paragraph where they placed it or made a certain statement. So let's go to the 5th paragraph, 45 through 56. There is yet another approach. Instead of rooting ethics in character or the consequences of actions, we can focus on our actions themselves. So it sounds like this was the third viewpoint. So let's look at those choices and see if there's anything that's relating to introducing the third viewpoint. We actually annotated it as VP3, third viewpoint. So the main purpose of the fifth paragraph was to develop a counter argument to claim that the greed is good. No, this did not claim that greed is good, so we can actually eliminate A as being the incorrect answer. Provide support for the idea that ethics is about character. That wasn't it. Describe a third approach to defining ethical economics. That's exactly what the third paragraph did. And then D, it says illustrate that one's actions are a result of one's character. So no. So C is the best answer to that question. We're going to move on to question 16. As used in line 58, clashes most nearly means what? So line 58 is right in here. Many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions pull in different directions, but clashes are not inevitable. That means conflict is going to take place. So yes, we already know that the answer to 16 is going to be A. I don't think there's any doubt. It's not mismatches, it's not collisions, it's not brawls. So 16 would have to be A, conflict. All right, and the next question, 17, is an evidence-based question. It's asking, which choice best supports the author's claim that there is common ground shared by different approaches to ethics described in the passage? So we knew that common ground was in this area, and it was in relation to coffee, fair trade coffee. So let's see. That was line 59 through 64. That's the only choice that actually has common ground in it. So we actually don't have to do too much reading. We can automatically say that C is the answer to question 17. And that allows us to continue working. So next question. The main idea of the final paragraph. Well, we haven't read past 66, so we can't answer 18. The data in the paragraph. So 19 is a data question. And so we probably should go back and read the remainder of this passage. So we'll be able to answer the questions that we skipped. And then we'll also get a chance to look at that graph. So we're going to pick up from line 68. Whenever we feel queasy about perfect competitive markets, the problem is often rooted in a phony conception of people. The model of man on which classical economics is based, an entirely rational and selfish being, is a parody, as John Stuart Mill, the philosopher who pioneered the model, accepted. Most people, even economists, now accept that this economic man is a fiction. So the economic man is a fiction. So we can annotate economic man is a fiction. We behave like a herd. We fear losses more than we hope for gains. Rarely can our brains process all the relevant facts. So we exhibit hard behavior. And then let's keep going with line 78. These human quirks mean we can never make purely rational decisions. A new wave of behavioral economists, aided by neuroscientists, is trying to understand our psychology, both alone and in groups, so they can anticipate our decisions in the marketplace more accurately. So we see here, it sounds as though efforts are underway to develop a fourth viewpoint, one which involves having behavioral economists partnering up with neuroscientists to understand our psychology. So it's going to be about, it's like psychology-based economics. So let's go on. But psychology can also help us understand why we react in disgust at economic injustice or accept immoral law as universal, which means that the relatively new science of human behavior might also define ethics for us. Ethical economics would then emerge from one of the least likely places, economists themselves. Having read the entire passage, we can then go on to question 18 and try to answer it. The main idea of the final paragraph is that what? So the final paragraph in this region, we were learning about a possible fourth viewpoint in which psychologists and economists are collaborating to come up with a fourth viewpoint. So let's read the choices and see if there's anything alluding to that. A says, human quirks make it difficult to predict people's ethical decisions accurately. I don't believe that that's what that was saying. Let's look at B. People universally react with disgust when faced with economic injustice. That was mentioned, but that was not the main idea of that final paragraph. That was just mentioned in passing, so B would not make sense. Understanding human psychology may help to define ethics in economics. In fact, that's what the emphasis was in this entire paragraph. So C would have to be the correct answer to this. Let's just read D. Economists themselves will be responsible for reforming the free market. It doesn't say anything about them reforming. It talks only once in passing that ethical economics could emerge from one of the least likely places, economics themselves. So it's not about reforming the market, which makes D incorrect as well. So we know C is the right answer. Let's go on to question 19. Data in the graph about per pound coffee profits in Tanzania, or Tanzania as the natives call it, most strongly support which of the following statements? So let's look at the graph right over here. So the data in the graph about per pound coffee profit in Tanzania most strongly supports which of the following statements? So anytime you have a graph, you always want to check your scale. You want to look at the x-axis, and you notice that the x-axis has years, and then you want to look at the y-axis. That's the amount of US cents per pound. So the dollar amount and over the years. We also have a little key right here. Understand the dashed line is fair trade coffee. The black line is regular coffee. So what is the data supporting? So let's go through the choices one by one and compare it to the data in the graph. Choice A, fair trade coffee consistently earned greater profits than regular coffee earned. Is it true? Yes, fair trade coffee was consistently earning a higher rate than regular coffee did. So I think, yeah, we can say that A is definitely true of this data. So yeah, we don't even have to keep reading. We know that A is it. You can read the rest if you'd like to check for yourself, but A is it for this question. Go on to the next question, question 20. Another data question. Data in the graph indicate that the greatest difference between per pound profits from fair trade coffee and those from regular coffee occurred during which period? So the greatest difference between fair trade and regular coffee. The greatest difference would be where the biggest gap is, right? So that would be between 2002 and 2004. Which makes B the answer to that question. Okay, let's go to question 21. Another data question. So there were 3 back-to-back data questions. Data in the graph provides most direct support for which idea in the passage? So let's go through the choices. Acting on empathy can be counterproductive. That's not true, because if you acting on empathy gave or earned more profit. So it's not counterproductive. Therefore, we can say A is not it. Ethical economics is defined by character. Well, the graph says nothing about character, so we can't answer B as being the right answer. Let's go for C. Ethical economics is still possible. That was actually mentioned in the passage, and this is proof that if you act ethically, case in point, fair trade coffee, you can still be profitable. So C sounds like it might be it, but let's check out D just to be sure. People fear losses more than they hope for gains. That is also mentioned in the passage, but it has nothing to do with this data. So with that said, we can unequivocally say that C is the correct answer to this question. However, remember that we skipped question 11 because we hadn't read the whole passage. It was a passage question. We definitely want to go back and attempt it. So the main purpose of this passage is to do what? Consider the ethical dilemma posed by cost-benefit analysis. B is describe a psychology study of ethical economic behavior. C is argue that the free market prohibits ethical economics. Or D, examine ways of evaluating the ethics of economics. So having read the entire passage, we know that we were presented with 3 different viewpoints on how to evaluate ethics in economics, and a possible 4th that's currently being developed. So that makes D the clear answer to this question. Now, please remember that if you skip a question when you're doing these exams because you're chunking, you want to make a note for yourself. Either circle this question rigorously, or at the bottom of each page on the bottom right corner, you want to write the number that you skipped. So when you are flipping through the pages, you will be able to see at a glance, I skipped question 11, and then you're going to come back and answer it before turning your paper in. That completes this passage. So great job on finishing passage 2 of test number 2. We're going to keep practicing, and I will see you in the next video where we'll be going over passage 3 of test number 2. See you there.